Lovely welcome. Thank you so much. I'm Stan Grant, and now for a week when the Treasurer Jim Chalmers has been telling us we need to have a conversation, we've all heard that, is the time for talk over? Tonight, is he prepared to take any hard decisions? Please welcome the Treasurer.
At the vigil for schoolboy Cassius Turvey at Town Hall last night, Greens Senator David Shoebridge said that he wished there were more people from federal parliament at the vigils listening and hearing powerful truths. Do you agree that there should have been greater attendance from politicians, and did you attend one of the vigils?
Jim?
Yep, thanks very much. And first of all, I think it is important that we acknowledge this sorry business at the beginning of the show. I think the thieving of Cassius's life is one of those moments, I think, where it makes all of us pause and wonder whether we are doing enough. Whether we are. I wasn't at the vigil this morning. I was in Perth, and at the event that I was at, we had a discussion about the vigil that had taken place in Perth. I'm told that one of the frankly stunning moments about it was when Cassius's family were, behaving with incredible grace given what they'd been through. And so I think we should acknowledge that too. We should acknowledge that we've got a long way to go as a country still, despite all the progress that we've made. And if your question is whether or not Cassius's death makes me and my colleagues understand that more needs to be done, then the answer is yes.
Jim, there is a vote looming on a voice to Parliament, but I was struck by something that Noel Pearson, one of the advocates for the voice, said in his Boyer lectures, and he said that Aboriginal people, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people, are the most unloved people in Australia. I would have to say sadly that as an Aboriginal person I share that view. Why are we so unloved?
Well, I mean, it's unacceptable if that's the case. I've spent a bit of time with Noel over the years. He's someone I listen to, and those Boyer lectures were, characteristically thoughtful and impactful and powerful. And again, we need to listen to the First Nations people of this country, not just listen, but act. The voice is a crucial part of that, in my opinion, but not just that. There is so much more that we need to do, and we have a government which is committed to doing more.
So you called the budget a bread and butter budget, but with non-discretionary items rising faster than the CPI indexation, welfare recipients like myself are meant to be grateful for that rise. What essentials should I be cutting from my budget?
Yeah, well, thank you, Fiona, for your question. And this goes to what is the biggest challenge in our economy and in our communities, in our society right now, which is that the cost of living are going through the roof, and that has a disproportionate impact on the most vulnerable amongst us, and we understand that. The budget, in so many different ways, that I handed down in Canberra 9 nights ago was about this challenge. And it had within it, as you, I think, are alluding to in your question, Fiona, billions of dollars of extra payments which come from the automatic indexation. I'm not for a moment claiming credit for that, but that is an important feature and function of our budget, that when inflation is growing as it is right now, then payments twice a year try to at least keep up with that. And I know that's not always enough. I know that's often not enough. But that's an important feature of the budget. My responsibility to you, Fiona, and to really the whole country is to try and take the right economic decisions at a national level in the context of all of this inflation to make sure that we're not making inflation worse, and if anything, we're investing in the sorts of things that make it easier for people. And in the context of a budget which has $1 trillion of debt and it's in deficit as far as the eye can see, then we've got to try and work out how do we provide that cost of living relief in a responsible way. And by responsible, I mean how do we provide money to people without making the inflation problem worse, which is really my major concern. And so we've got some cost of living relief in there for the cost of medicines, the cost of childcare, paid parental leave, housing affordability, and we've got a policy to get wages growing again. And I understand and I can feel...
And the question was, Treasurer, and I might just go back to you, Fiona, on this.
Yeah.
You're having to make real decisions. The Treasurer is talking about projections. He's talking about measures that are going to come in over the coming years. But in your situation right now, what are you having to decide?
Well, it's things like healthcare. I mean, I had an eye test the other day and I have to go for a further scan. So the cost of that I then have to take from, say, the next doctor's appointment they had booked. I'll have to push that back again because my GP doesn't bulk bill anymore and things like that. And DSP will go up with inflation, yes, but still playing catch up and it's still falling behind. And
the reality is, Treasurer, that you said in the budget, it is people like Fiona, people who are indebted or people who are struggling, who are going to have to bear the burden of this war against inflation. When does this turn around for someone like Fiona?
Well, again, the best thing that we can do is to try and address the root cause of this problem, which is the inflation, and that's what the budget was about. In addition to that, and even in the context of a budget which was quite restrained in its spending, still big investments in Medicare, still the indexation of those payments, doing what we can, what we responsibly can to make life a little bit easier for people. But I don't want to pretend to Fiona or to anyone in Fiona's position that the budget 9 nights ago fixed all of these challenges. And I do need to be upfront with all of you about the nature of this challenge that we are confronting right now. And we will do what we can, but we need to do what we can in the context of only promising what we can afford and trying to work out what our best contribution to this problem is. And our best contribution to this is being restrained in our spending, giving some cost of living relief where it's responsible, and investing in the sorts of things that will get us out of this.
But if inflation is public enemy number one, this is, as you've said, it's the dragon you have to slay. It is people like Fiona, it is people on the front line of this who are going to feel the heat.
Yeah,
because anything that helps them fuels inflation. This is the bind you're in.
Yeah.
Can you truly tell us where inflation will peak out? You projected at 7.75% in the budget. That's gone. The Reserve Bank is now talking about 8%. Internationally, it'll top 9%. You can't really sit here and tell people where this will top out, can you?
Well, nobody has a perfect crystal ball, but the expectations of the Reserve Bank and the Treasury is that this inflation challenge will get a bit worse until the end of the year, and
Which
then
means
start
interest rates
to
keep
moderate.
going up, doesn't it?
Well, the Reserve Bank themselves have said that they expect interest rates to go up a bit further. They take those decisions independently. I don't preempt or second-guess those. But I take responsibility for my part in this as the country's Treasurer. I think for too long we've had people in roles like mine who pretend that they have nothing to do with it, right? I accept responsibility in the budgets that I put together. And the main thing I can do here, the worst thing that could happen for Fiona and for people around Australia, is if we let this inflation get out of control. And you summed it up really well, Stan, a moment ago. If you are not careful with your spending, if you are somehow ill-disciplined, then we would have this inflation problem worse for longer. And that's what I'm trying to avoid.
Of course, Fiona, when it comes to your own personal spending, where do you sit each week after you've paid the essentials?
Pension day tomorrow, so actually do have $20 in because it came in for some reason late today. $20 in my bank account at the moment for pension day tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're working week to week very much and shuffling and.
Good luck. It's a common story. Thank you for bringing
Thanks, Fiona.
that story and that question.
Thanks, Jim, for your time. I have 7 children, ranging from 14 to 28. So you can imagine any help is appreciated. When are we going to see more help with cost of living? We need to see a plan, not just talk. Why don't the big energy companies get pressured to give us more relief? Thank you.
Hello. We live in South Australia, my wife and my disabled son. Our last account, electricity account, came to almost $1,600, which is absolutely very expensive. Now, living in Australia, a country with plenty of energy resources, there's no excuse for such a big account for a family of 3 living in a unit. And I read that the prices are going to go even higher next year, maybe about 50%. You know, this is a lot. This is a lot. So could you please let us know how you can help us pay our energy bills?
$1,600 for an electricity bill for a family living in a unit, and it's going to get worse, isn't it?
That's our expectation. Prices, as everybody here knows, certainly Jeff and George know, electricity prices started going up earlier in the year. A big reason for that, which doesn't make it any easier, but the main driver of that is the war in Ukraine, which is causing havoc with global energy markets and pushing up the price of electricity here.
I'm going to stop you there, because this is the conversation that you've been having, and you've been having it for 10 days since the budget. They specifically asked you, what are you going to do?
And I'm keen to get to that. What I want to acknowledge first is that even though these pressures are coming at us from around the world, they are felt around the kitchen table. I do acknowledge that. The work that we are doing now in our government is to work out what kind of intervention we can make in the energy market so that the sorts of price rises that are expected, that are forecast at the moment, don't eventuate.
Okay, so can we go through some of those?
Of course.
Are you going to give a subsidy to people directly to allow them to meet their energy bills?
Well, there are 3 paths that we can choose from. And it's difficult for me as Treasurer to kind of think out loud about these. There's some market sensitivity and there's some work that we're still doing, to be upfront with you, but there are broadly 3 paths. The first path is something in the tax area. The second path is the one that you just referred to, Stan, which is around subsidies, whether that to be to people or to companies. And thirdly, whether there's some kind of change in regulation that can bring the price down.
And in terms of precisely for the reasons you said to Fiona about inflationary pressure, you're not going to give people a cash handout, are you?
That would be unlikely, but we don't want to rule it out, because if this situation continues to deteriorate over time, you want to have all of the options. But our preference is to do something with regulation. And the work that we're doing right now, the work that I was doing even up to coming on the show, is to see with other ministers like Chris Bowen and Ed Husic and Madeleine King and the Prime Minister whether there's some kind of intervention that we can make to keep these prices down. That's our preference. But we don't want to rule out subsidies or tax. It may be necessary down the track, but let's see if we can do something with regulation first.
When you're talking about regulation, are you talking here about setting a price, about trying to put a lid on the price? And for that, you're going to have to be able to regulate that, hold some of the supply back from going overseas and cap it, aren't you?
Oh, that is one of the options, is around price caps. And a lot of people have made those suggestions to us publicly, that would be one of the options. And that's obviously one thing that we're considering. It's not the only type of regulation, but it's one of the ones that's most commonly suggested to us. We have a little more work to do on this, and so I can't tell you tonight, I can't tell George and Jeff the final conclusion, but to reassure them that we know that electricity prices that began before the electricity price rises, which began before the election, are continuing now and intensifying.
In fact, what you said is over the next 2 years it'll be 56% higher. So that's another $800 that George is going to have to find. So his bill of $1,600 now is going to be $2,400.
Yeah, it's going to be 20% and then 30%.
Yeah.
The 20% is already flowing. Some of you are already paying that. That was the price rise that was hidden by our predecessors during the election campaign. That was the front end of it, 20%. We're expecting, or Treasury's expecting, another 30% next year. Obviously, any responsible government confronted with that kind of number and what it means for Jeff and George and for many of you has to consider its options, and that's what we're doing.
If you can't give us an answer now about what intervention will look like, can you give us a timeline? It's been 10 days since the budget. Prices are going up. We know that people are paying more right across the board for inflation. Are we going to see this in the next week, 2 weeks, the next month? How long is it going to take you?
Well, first of all, I know that 10 days can sometimes sound like a long time, but what
it does when you're trying to stretch $20.
Yeah, but what we're dealing with here is we've got to balance the fact that a lot of these companies have got international contracts. There's a lot of market sensitivity. I mean, we do care about our reputation as a trading nation. We've got a lot of contracts with Korea and Japan and elsewhere. And so there are a whole bunch of issues associated with this, and it's more complex than it sounds. But that's not a reason not to act here. It's a reason to act in a considered, responsible and sensible way. I think anybody watching the show tonight should expect that the government will move as quickly as they can, Can I talk about before? But there are lots of issues at play.
Before Christmas, are we going to see a plan, a costed plan with detail before Christmas?
That's my intention, yeah, certainly. But as I said, I'm doing my best not to I'm doing my best to be upfront with you about this. We are working on it more or less around the clock right now, and we will move on it as soon as we responsibly can. But there are a lot of complexities here that we need to weigh up. You don't want to make a change here which causes all kinds of unintended consequences elsewhere. We want to get it right, and we'll get it right as soon as we can.
We're going to do a quick fire round of questions now where we're looking, Treasurer, for some, not from talking points and not from briefing documents, but quick yes, no or short answers. We'll take a question from Bilal Muzaffar.
So the rise of Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister in the UK is a moment to celebrate the evolving diversity in UK politics. Will we see a Prime Minister of colour here in our lifetime?
Yes. We've just elected the most diverse intake of new MPs on the Labor side nationally in the history of this country. I have been spending time with the Sally Situs and the Zanita Mascarenas and Fatima Payman and all of these absolutely unbelievable new representatives from very diverse communities. I have absolutely no doubt that we will see a Prime Minister of colour in my lifetime.
Do they have to line up behind you? Is it something you'd like to see for yourself?
They can line up in front of me.
Political answer. Here's Jeremy Gray.
Currently, 3.3 million Australians live below the poverty line. Will the government commit to ending poverty, or does it believe that poverty is acceptable?
No, I don't think anyone can believe that poverty is acceptable. If it was an easy challenge to address, we would have fixed it by now. You've got to chip away at a problem of that magnitude. I think housing's a big part of the story. I talked about that already. And there are other ways that we can support families and people doing it tough. And as a Labor government, we are always looking for opportunities to do more. We don't want to ever give people false hope that you can just click your fingers and make poverty disappear. But you can commit to work away at alleviating it and eliminating it, and that's what we do.
Isn't there a structural issue here, though? Because we are seeing now that intergenerational poverty is becoming embedded, that privilege is embedded, that the rich are getting richer. They're going to get richer even during an inflationary cycle because they're earning more on what they've got saved away, and they're passing that on to their children. At what point do we have to get serious about taxing inheritance, about looking at intergenerational wealth?
Well, I mean, I want to make it clear, we're not contemplating an inheritance tax or anything that looks like that.
Why not, though? I mean, they've got a round of applause, and we know that it is embedded. We talked about our own situations, and our children are going to be better because they're going to inherit from us. Other people are not going to have that. Why not?
I think
other countries do.
I think that there are other ways to make the tax system fairer and to generate this kind of intergenerational mobility that we want to see. We made a start on that on budget night, taxing multinationals differently, tax compliance measures, some other measures in the budget. And we need to continue to work away at that front, on that front. I think we can make this tax system fairer. I just don't want to give you the sense that we're going to act on that particular one because we're not.
A video now from Peter Pepin.
Labor promised a reduction in power prices of $275 by 2025. How was this calculated, given the uncertain current economic times?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Well, the truth is it was calculated from modelling in 2021. And you're right to allude in your question to the fact that a lot has happened since then. And if you think about the war in Ukraine, which a lot of people anticipated would be a 2 or 3 week affair, has become something that's lasted many months, and the pressure on global energy markets has intensified really substantially. And so that $275 figure was from modelling done in 2021, and it was about an outcome in 2025. And in 2022, we've got a war in Europe, which is pushing up prices for everyone.
Sounds like you're saying now you can't deliver on that. 275, you can't deliver on that.
Well, what I'm saying is we need to recognise the reality. We don't know in 2022 what the impact of the war in Ukraine is going to be on a 2025 outcome. That's just to level with people. It remains the fact, and the modelling that we're talking about in 2021, it remains the fact that the cheapest new sources of energy are renewable energy. That's still the case. But I don't think we can ignore the fact that when the modelling was done in 2021 and an outcome in 2025, we've got this enormous event which has changed substantially the outlook for energy prices, not just in Australia but around the world.
The war in Ukraine was underway during the election and you were still promising it. But that 275, you're saying now you can't deliver on that. You can't be certain that you will deliver on that number.
Well, we don't know what the situation will be in 2025, but the point that you made at the start of your question, I think I need to pull up, which is even though the war was happening when the election was on, most people, including experts that spend their whole professional lives monitoring these things, thought the war would be over quickly, and they underestimated the impact on energy pipelines and all of that. And so I think it is self-evident that a longer war in Europe with a more intense impact on global energy markets is going to impact us here.
Yeah, and there go a whole lot of projections, but we'll come to that. Let's hear from Anam Khan.
The budget paints a pretty bleak outlook. Should we be prepared for a recession?
Yeah, thanks, Anam. I don't think so. Certainly not the Treasury's expectation in their forecasts that we will go that way. But Europe will, UK will. Other countries are at risk as well, and we won't be completely immune from that. When the global economy turns down substantially, as it did almost 15 years ago, as it did a couple of years ago, we can't completely escape the consequences of that. But our expectation is that we will avoid a recession. Our economy will slow substantially next year, quite substantially, as a consequence of the global downturn, the impact of higher interest rates and some other issues as well. And so my view about the economy is I am really quite optimistic about the future of our economy and the future of our country. But over the next 6 or 12 or 18 months, we are in for some very tricky terrain from a global point of view, and we will feel the impact here.
But if Europe is, the United States is skating very close to that, dropping down to about 1% growth. You're forecasting 1.5% in the second half of next year. That's getting perilously close. If we keep seeing interest rates go up, unemployment starts to edge up, people stop spending, we know that's going to have an impact. So what you're saying right now, the answer to that question is you don't know, do you, whether we'll go into recession or not? You're hoping, but you don't know.
Well, what I'm saying is that I don't expect us to go into recession. And if your point is that things can change, of course they can. And the biggest risk is actually if we let inflation get out of control and interest rates have to chase higher and higher inflation, then that makes, as the Reserve Bank Governor said a couple of nights ago, that makes a recession more likely here, but it's not our expectation.
Our last quickfire question, and it comes from Conrad Mikalski.
Just a quick either or. What would you rather? Everyone earning more than $180K a year receive an $8,000 bonus each year, or free university education and dental in Medicare?
It's a multiple choice.
Well, I think on education, I think our HECS system works pretty well. And I know that's not your view, I can tell by your reaction.
Well, he's paying back a debt while inflation's going up.
Yeah, understood. I think the HECS system works relatively well. If your question is, can we make the tax system fairer, I think we can. I know that you're referring to a very specific tax change there, and you're probably aware that we haven't changed our view on that in the 9 days since I handed down the budget. But I do think we should be looking for ways to make the tax system fairer, and we should be doing that so that we can fund the things that our society values, like education and public health.
If you've been talking a lot about, you know, having foresight and the things you can't expect, knowing what you know now, looking at the downturn internationally, the impact of inflation, looking at fairness and intergenerational inequality, would you have committed to stage 3 tax cuts all the way to 200,000 with the cost it's going to take from the budget if you knew what you knew now?
Well, even better than that, Stan. I mean, when those tax cuts were presented to the Parliament, what we tried to do at the time was amend them. And we tried to amend them so that people on middle incomes...
But now you want to deliver them.
Well, your question was, if we had our time again, would we do it differently?
Now, knowing what you know now, can you commit to it knowing what we know now?
Well, they are in the budget already. They come in more than 2 budgets away. We've got more pressing priorities that we're working on. But your question was, with the benefit of hindsight, I mean, when they were presented to the Parliament, we said we should find a way to let tax relief flow to people on middle incomes and not on some of those higher incomes. We tried to amend it, we were unsuccessful. And so we had to make a choice. Do we vote for the whole thing or do we try and knock it all over? I still believe that people on middle incomes, in the context of bracket creep and all of the other kind of jargon that people are familiar with when we talk about tax, there is a case for tax relief for people.
Yeah, but someone earning $200,000 a year and getting, you know, $9,000, almost $10,000 extra, is there a case for that?
Well, we made it clear at the time that we would have designed them differently at the beginning. They are now a feature of the budget. I have been upfront with people and said that the cost of these tax cuts is rising and that there is a broader conversation to have, not just in this area, about how we make the budget more sustainable.
You sound like someone who's not really fully committed to these. You sound as if you really don't want to do it. You don't want to do it, do you?
I wouldn't describe it that way. I think in the discussion of the last few weeks, and I'm not going to pretend I wasn't part of this discussion, you know, I think inevitably when you've got $250 billion of tax cuts to come in, you've got all these structural pressures on the budget and you're working out your priorities, the country will want to hold those tax cuts up to the light. And I've been part of that conversation. But we haven't changed our view on them coming in. We had a crack at the time at making them different. We were unsuccessful. And they, as a consequence, are a feature of the budget. And there are other ways that we can make the tax system and the budget fairer and more sustainable.
Good evening, Mr. Chalmers.
Hi, Paula.
Your history teacher made a huge and positive impact on you. What words do you have for the many teachers leaving the profession because of being overworked and undervalued? And what can a Labor government do to influence policy change to attract teachers back to the profession?
You a teacher, Paula?
Yes.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Well, first of all, Paula, thank you. And to all of those teachers that you're referencing, we need you. We desperately need you. My colleague Jason Clare, the Education Minister, has made an announcement today about how we deal with this shortage of teachers. I can't believe how happy your question would make my history teacher. His name's Norbert Grulich. Probably the most influential person in my life, not in my own family. And I can just tell by looking at you, Paula, that there must be hundreds of people around this country who would feel the same way about you. My teacher believed in me at a point where I didn't believe in myself. And that's the big gift that I think teachers give kids.
We don't value them, though, do we, to the extent that we should? And I know that what the Minister was talking about today, Jason Clare, is working with states and looking at a blueprint to be able to work together to do just that.
Totally. I mean, this is the challenge, right? We understand the indispensable role that teachers play in our society for all of the reasons Paula would know as well as anyone. And we need to find ways to value teachers more, to retain them better, In my own community, I talk to a lot of school principals where they have these amazing teachers come in and all the effort goes into retaining them. It's hard to retain teachers. They go to more lucrative positions, or they retrain, or they might go and have kids and then not come back. All of these challenges that Jason Clare's very attuned to. But I really want to assure you, Paula, that we place the same kind of value on teachers that you obviously do. And I can't think of any of the colleagues that I have who haven't had an experience like I've had with Norbert and many of your students would have had with you.
That's all we have time for again. Please thank our guest, Jim Chalmers. Thank you. Thank you, Treasurer. It's a great opportunity to sit here and have just these types of discussions. So I really appreciate you giving us your time and sharing this time tonight with our audience. Please thank you as well to all of you at home for helping to shape this conversation, sending your questions in via video. Everybody who has brought their questions here tonight as well. I'm having a spell next week. David Spears is going to be in the chair, filling in live from Melbourne. Minister for Early Childhood Education and Youth, Anne Ali, and British author Camilla Shamsi will join the panel to answer your questions. Go to our website to register to be in the audience. Until I see you again, have a great night.